Hands on the hood, now! The officer's shout tore through the parking lot like shattered glass. His hand pressed against the holster, the other already reaching for the man's shoulder. And in that instant, the entire street seemed to freeze. Phones lifted, heads turned, silence thickened. Not because they believed the accusation, but because of the force behind it. The man in the driver's seat of the sleek black sedan moved slowly. He turned his head, calm, deliberate, and pushed open the door. A navy suit stepped into view, shoes polished, shirt crisp against his dark skin, tall, broad, shoulders squared. He didn't rush. He didn't cower. License and registration, the officer barked again, voice sharp enough to cut skin. The man reached for his wallet with unshakable patience, like he had rehearsed this movement 100 times. Maybe he had. But before the leather could leave his pocket, the accusation landed. This vehicle's reported stolen. Men like you don't drive cars like this. The words didn't just hang in the air, they poisoned it. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He looks like he owns the damn thing." Another muttered, "This is about more than a car." Still, the man didn't react. He placed both hands flat on the glossy hood, fingers spread like an offering. His face remained unreadable, but his eyes, steady, deep, and sharp, seemed to look past the officer, past the crowd, into a horizon only he could see. He had been here before. At 25, accused of forging his own loan papers. At 30, asked to leave a dealership because he didn't look like a buyer. At 37, denied entry to a boardroom in a skyscraper he owned. Different uniform, same script. And now again. The officer leaned closer, voice dropping low enough for the crowd to strain and still hear. "You people always think you can steal success." The line wasn't just prejudice, it was prophecy. It revealed everything he believed about the man standing before him and everything the man had spent decades proving wrong. The crowd stirred. A teenager raised his phone higher, eyes wide. A woman in her 50s shook her head, saying loudly, "Why are you treating him like a criminal? He's done nothing." Another voice called out, "This isn't right." But the man in the suit didn't turn. He didn't answer. He let the silence weigh heavier than their outrage, heavier than the officer's arrogance. Silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The officer misread it. He shoved the man harder against the hood, snapping, "Speak when spoken to. Shut your mouth." Oaksink. The man's gaze lifted, not at the cop, but at the sky above the crowd. Still calm, still patient, still unshaken. And in that moment, something in the air shifted. The crowd wasn't just watching. They were aligning. Phones recording. Eyes narrowing. Tension building. The officer thought he was in control. But the man in the suit knew better. He always knew. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. He remained silent under the weight of accusation, letting the officer build his own case of arrogance. But silence wasn't surrender. It was the opening act. And today, the curtain would not close on humiliation, it would close on revelation. The officer's grip tightened on his arm, fingers digging into fabric, trying to pull authority out of muscle. But the man in the navy suit didn't resist. He moved only enough to keep balance, planting his polished shoes firmly on the asphalt, as if the ground itself belonged to him. The crowd edged closer, phones still raised. A teenager whispered to his recording, "They pulled him out like a thief, but look at him, he doesn't even flinch." The words buzzed online seconds later, already spreading. The officer didn't notice. He was too busy performing. "You're not fooling anyone," he said loud enough for the witnesses. "Stolen cars don't come with custom suits." The man's gaze didn't break. Calm, focused, like stone carved by patience. He knew the words weren't about the car. They were about him, about what he represented, about every door he'd ever walked into and been told he didn't belong, because this wasn't his first humiliation. At 25, a clerk froze his account because large deposits don't look normal for someone like you. At 30, a loan officer labeled him high risk, even when he offered triple collateral. At 37, a doorman blocked him from entering a conference where he was the keynote speaker. "Deliveries in the back," the man had said. Every time the same script, different actors, same prejudice. Now, 42 years old, standing under open sky with strangers watching, it was happening again. And still he didn't raise his voice. Instead, he let the silence press heavier than any hand on his shoulder. The officer mistook patience for compliance. He leaned in, sneering, "You think that watch on your wrist makes you somebody? You people always wear fake shine to look important." The man turned his head slightly, enough for the sunlight to catch the steel and gold, a genuine piece. But he didn't argue. He didn't need to. The insult echoed louder than any defense. From the crowd, a woman called out, "Check his papers before you put your hands on him." Another voice, sharper, "This is abuse. He's standing still." But the officer's radio crackled, fueling his certainty. "Possible stolen vehicle, African-American male, navy suit. Stand by for backup." The words traveled through the air like a stain. Backup, male, suit, African-American. The details reduced him to a profile, stripped of dignity. The man closed his eyes briefly, inhaling slow, steady. He had expected this, anticipated it even. That morning, when he left his glass corner office, he chose not to bring his driver, chose not to wear his lapel pin engraved with his company's crest. He wanted to see if the system had changed, if silence could walk freely without a badge of wealth to protect it. It hadn't. And now, here he was, exactly where he knew he'd end up, on the hood of his own car, accused of theft in front of strangers, his patience measured against prejudice. He opened his eyes again, dark irises cutting through the crowd, landing briefly on the teenager filming. A small, almost imperceptible nod. Not permission, not encouragement, just acknowledgement. "I see you. Keep watching." The teenager's breath caught. The phone trembled in his grip, but he didn't lower it. The officer shoved again, harder this time. "You're not listening? I said shut your mouth." But the man did listen. He listened to every word, because every syllable was building the case he didn't have to argue. Every shove was another nail in the officer's own coffin. The asphalt burned faintly under his palms, the hood warming under the sun. But he stood steady, no trembling, no plea, just silence, sharp, deliberate, louder than the crowd's outrage. And still, the crowd swelled. Dozens now, phones glowing, murmurs rising. "This is wrong." He didn't resist. "Look at him, he's not even moving." The officer's authority cracked in the echo of those whispers. His voice rose, desperate to drown them out. "Security will verify. You're not walking away from this, not today." The man's jaw tightened, just once. Then he exhaled, slow, a measured release of years of practice. He had carried this weight before, but today he wasn't carrying it alone. Today, the eyes of strangers bore witness. Today, the silence had an audience, and he knew exactly how this story would end. Because he wasn't just a man accused of theft, he was the owner of everything they thought he didn't deserve. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint at first, then swelling louder, slicing through the murmurs of the crowd. Backup was coming. The officer straightened his stance, smugness crawling across his face like victory already claimed. "See that?" he said, tightening his grip on the man's arm. "They'll be here any second, and then you'll explain yourself in a cell." The man in the suit didn't flinch. His palms stayed on the hood, steady, his reflection gleaming back at him from the polished paint. He let the words roll past, like waves breaking on stone. The crowd reacted before he did. "This is insane!" someone shouted. "He gave you no trouble," another added. Phones tilted higher, capturing not just the officer's aggression but the man's stillness beside it. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One consumed by anger, the other anchored in silence. The first squad car screeched into the lot. Doors flung open. 2 more officers stepped out, hands on belts, eyes darting between their colleague and the scene before them. "What's the charge?" one asked. "Stolen vehicle." The first officer barked back, his voice confident, rehearsed. Caught him red-handed. The newcomer looked at the man pressed against the hood. Suit clean, shoes polished, demeanor unbroken. For a split second, doubt flickered in his eyes, but training drowned it out. He moved closer. "Sir, do you have any proof this car belongs to you?" The man finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the inside pocket of his jacket. The crowd hushed. Phones zoomed in. The officer's grip on his arm jerked tight. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he barked, voice cracking under the weight of fear disguised as authority. The man paused, then withdrew empty fingers, spreading them open in the air. Calm, controlled, wordless. He wasn't going to give them an excuse. Not yet. The teenager with the phone whispered into his mic, "He's not even fighting. He's letting them build their own mess." His live stream ticked past 1,000 viewers. Comments scrolled, "This isn't right. Stay strong, we're watching. The officer grew louder, desperate for control. You think silence makes you smart? You think standing here all calm makes you innocent? He leaned close, spitting words. I can see right through you. But he couldn't. None of them could, because the man's silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight. It was history. It was strategy. The woman in the crowd stepped forward, voice cutting through the chaos. Check the system first. Don't you dare touch him until you check. Oh. Ma'am, stand back, one of the backup officers ordered. But his voice carried less conviction. He'd seen the same thing she had. Dignity unbroken, even under pressure. The man finally spoke, his voice low, measured, steady as bedrock. Is this where justice lives now? Accusation without evidence? Force without truth? The words silenced the lot more effectively than any siren. Even the crowd paused, phones trembling as they caught every syllable. The officer sneered, trying to fill the void. You're a thief, a fraud. Men like you always are. The man's eyes lifted, locking with his, dark and unwavering. Men like me built the very walls you hide behind. The crowd erupted, gasps, shouts, cheers. The tension cracked. The officer's face flushed crimson. His grip tightened again, but the power was shifting, and he knew it. Another squad car pulled in. More uniforms, more witnesses. The circle widened, but so did the doubt. The story wasn't clean anymore. It wasn't simple. The crowd had seen too much, recorded too much. And through it all, the man remained unshaken. Every insult hurled at him only dug the officer deeper. Every shove made the crowd louder. Every second of silence became proof of strength. The man knew exactly what was happening. He was no longer the accused. He was the stage. And the officer was writing his own downfall, line by line, shove by shove, word by reckless word. The hood beneath his hands was warm now, sun beating down, but his pulse stayed slow, his breath stayed steady. And when he finally spoke again, the words were not for the officer, they were for the world watching. You've mistaken silence for weakness. That's your last mistake. The line dropped like a hammer. The crowd roared. The teenager's live stream exploded with comments. Phones shook as people tried to capture it all. And in that instant, the officer realized this wasn't just an arrest. It was a reckoning. The echo of his words still rippled through the crowd. You've mistaken silence for weakness. That's your last mistake. Phones caught every syllable, beams of blue light reflecting off lenses and trembling hands. The officer froze for half a heartbeat, thrown off balance, then doubled down, his grip snapping tighter on the man's arm. You think you're clever? He hissed, eyes darting at the growing circle of strangers. We'll see how clever you are when the cuffs are on. The man didn't resist. He didn't twist away. He simply tilted his head, eyes narrowing, gaze steady enough to make the officer falter. Then, slowly, almost casually, he shifted one hand from the hood to his jacket pocket. The crowd gasped. The officer jerked back, hand flying to his holster. Don't move. But the man's hand emerged not with a weapon, not with aggression, only a sleek black phone, screen glowing to life with a single swipe. He pressed one button, just one. The call rang once before it was answered. This is him, the man said, voice calm even. Activate the protocol. That was all. No shouting, no plea, just instruction. The phone went dark again as quickly as it had lit. The crowd buzzed. What did he just do? Someone whispered. The teenager whispered to his stream. Y'all, he just made a call, like, he planned this. The officer laughed harshly, trying to reclaim ground. Oh, so now you're calling your buddies? Gonna cry for help? Won't save you. He sneered, but his voice wavered. Your little tricks won't work on me. The man tucked the phone back into his jacket, shoulders rolling back, posture unbroken. His silence returned heavier now, sharper, like the weight before thunder cracks. Another squad car pulled up. 2 more officers stepped out. One of them, a sergeant, scanned the scene with narrowed eyes. What's going on here? He asked. The first officer jumped at the chance. Caught him driving a stolen car. Won't show papers. Acting suspicious. I've got him restrained. But even as he spoke, the sergeant studied the man pressed against the hood, the tailored suit, the unshaken eyes, the absence of panic. Something didn't fit. Did you run the plate? The sergeant asked. System flagged it. The officer shot back. It's not his. The sergeant's jaw tightened. He didn't respond right away. He kept looking at the man's posture, at the crowd filming, at the teenager whispering into a live feed. And then, at the officer whose face was flushed with fury. The man on the hood didn't break the silence. He didn't need to, because silence wasn't emptiness. It was a mirror. And right now, it was reflecting the officer's arrogance back at him for everyone to see. Finally, the man shifted. His voice cut through the noise, calm but carrying, like stone dropped into water. I told you once, accusation without truth is nothing. Keep digging, and you'll find the bottom is closer than you think. Gasps rippled. Phones caught it. The line was already destined to trend. The officer shoved him harder against the hood, desperation burning in his movements. Shut up. You don't get to talk. But the man did talk, and his silence in between each word was louder than the officer's rage. Every second you hold me here, he said, eyes locking on the sergeant now. You're not restraining me. You're restraining yourself. The truth is on its way. The sergeant frowned, uncertain. The backup officers shifted uneasily. The crowd's murmurs swelled. And in the distance, a sleek black SUV turned the corner, tinted windows glinting in the sun. It pulled up slowly, deliberately, like it belonged to a different world than the flashing lights and frantic shouts. The officer didn't notice. He was too busy performing control he was already losing. But the man in the suit noticed. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He simply straightened his back, his palms still steady on the hood, eyes fixed forward, because he knew what the SUV carried. He knew what the protocol had set in motion, and he knew the stage was nearly ready for the curtain to lift. The crowd felt it too. Phones stayed raised, voices hushed now, anticipation thick in the air. This wasn't just a stop anymore, it was a countdown. And the man in the suit, the man accused, restrained, humiliated, was the only one who knew how it would end. The black SUV idled at the curb, its engine humming low, windows tinted too dark for the crowd to see inside. But its presence alone shifted the air. Conversations hushed, phones steadied. Everyone knew this wasn't ordinary backup, this was something else. The man in the suit didn't turn his head, didn't acknowledge the vehicle. He simply let the knowledge of its arrival anchor him further. Calm, centered, waiting. The officer, oblivious, grew more frantic. The power was slipping, and he felt it. You think your little show intimidates me? He barked, shoving the man harder against the hood. You think dressing up in fancy clothes makes you somebody? You're nothing but a thief in a suit. The words cut sharper than the shove. They weren't about the car anymore. They were about history, about identity, about a system that had rehearsed this script for generations. The crowd erupted. That's enough, someone shouted. Check his damn ID already, another screamed. The sergeant tried to intervene, voice low, controlled. That's enough, officer. Let's confirm before. But the officer snapped, spinning on him. Don't tell me how to do my job. I know a liar when I see one. Phones caught every second. The teenager's live stream surged past 5,000 viewers, comments flooding. He's losing it. This cop is done. Stay strong, man. The officer turned back, fury written across his face. He leaned close to the man's ear, words dripping venom meant for him alone, but the crowd still heard. You people never learn. Doesn't matter how high you climb, we'll always drag you back down. Gasps tore through the crowd like thunder. The woman in the front stepped forward, tears of anger shining in her eyes. That's it. That's who you are. You don't want justice. You want control. The officer whipped around, jabbing a finger at her. Step back or you'll be next. The crowd surged, voices rising, no longer whispers but shouts. This is abuse. He's done nothing. Let him go. Ugh. The sergeant's face tightened, the doubt now carved into his expression. He raised his hand, motioning the other officers to hold position. For the first time, hesitation cracked the wall of authority. The man on the hood lifted his head, finally breaking his stillness. His eyes swept across the crowd, meeting gaze after gaze. The teenager, the woman, strangers who had become witnesses, defenders, amplifiers. He spoke, voice low but carrying, sharpened by restraint. You hear him. You see him. This isn't about stolen cars, it never was. The crowd roared in agreement, voices layering into one. The officer's face flushed, veins straining at his temple. He yanked the man upright, gripping his suit lapel with both fists. You think you can turn them against me? You think these people matter? You don't belong here, you never will. The man's feet planted firmly, his body unshaken even as the fabric of his suit bunched in the officer's hands. His reply was quiet, but it cut through the shouting like a blade. I belong everywhere truth belongs. The line cracked open the atmosphere. Cheers exploded from the crowd, phones trembling as they tried to capture it. The SUV's back door opened. A man in a tailored black uniform stepped out, earpiece glinting in the sunlight. His presence radiated authority, calm and deliberate. The crowd's noise faltered, attention shifting. The officer spun, eyes narrowing. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" The man in the suit didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the countdown was nearly finished. The protocol he'd triggered was already unfolding. The uniformed man from the SUV moved closer, his steps measured, his face unreadable. He spoke just once, voice crisp, professional. "Sir, confirmation has been delivered to the department system. They'll see it any second." The officer blinked, confusion slicing through his rage. "What are you talking about?" The man in the suit adjusted his lapel, straightened his posture, and looked directly at him. Calm, silent, absolute. The crowd leaned in, breathless. They knew the moment was coming. And the officer, still gripping his collar, still drowning in arrogance, had no idea he was standing at the edge of his own downfall. The crowd was electric now, phones lifted like torches, their voices crashing in waves of outrage. The black SUV idled, silent, heavy as a shadow. The suited man stood tall again, his lapel straightened, his calm unbroken. But the officer wasn't finished. Not yet. Rage twisted his face, veins bulging against the strain of control he thought he still had. He yanked the man closer, his voice loud enough for the cameras, sharp enough to cut flesh. "You think this ends with your little show?" he spat. "People like you don't win. Not here. Not ever." The words poisoned the air. For a heartbeat, the crowd went still. Then voices erupted again, louder, angrier. "This is racism! Fire him now!" Enough. The sergeant stepped forward, hand raised. "Officer, that's enough. Release him." But the officer ignored it, his grip tightening like shackles. "Number, he's not walking away, not while I'm standing here." His hand shot down, grabbing the man's wrist, twisting it behind his back. The crowd screamed. Phones tilted, capturing every second. "Don't you dare," someone shouted. "He's not resisting," another cried. The man's body bent slightly with the force, but his face stayed steady, eyes forward, calm even as the officer forced him toward the cuffs. "You see this?" the officer shouted, dragging his words toward the crowd. "This is what happens when you lie, when you pretend to be more than you are. You end up in chains where you belong." Gasps ripped through the bystanders. A woman covered her mouth. The teenager's live stream exploded with furious comments. "Chains? Did he just say chains? This guy's career is over. We're all witnesses." The sergeant's jaw locked, fury flashing in his eyes. But he hesitated, torn between loyalty to uniform and the weight of public eyes. The man in the suit inhaled once, deep, steady. The steel in his gaze sharpened, not anger, not fear, but certainty. His voice emerged low, precise. "Chains don't hold me. They hold the hands that put them on." Ibar. The line sliced the moment open. The crowd roared, their fury shifting into something larger, stronger. Applause erupted, shouts of defiance echoing. The officer's face twisted, desperate. He yanked the cuffs from his belt, metal glinting under the sun. "We'll see about that. You're going down, right now." The suited man didn't resist. He allowed his wrist to be pulled, allowed the cuffs to scrape cold against his skin. His stillness mocked the officer's frenzy. His silence turned every shove into self-indictment. But the SUV doors opened again. Two more men in black stepped out, their presence deliberate, their posture radiating authority not borrowed from a badge but earned from a higher power. One of them held a tablet. Its screen glowed bright against the daylight. He moved forward, unhurried, his voice firm. "Sir, confirmation is live. The system shows him as the registered owner." The crowd erupted. "I knew it. Check the screen." "Oh, let him go." The officer froze, cuffs dangling from his grip. His eyes darted between the tablet and the man in the suit, confusion flooding in where arrogance once lived. What are you talking about?" he stammered. The suited man turned his head slightly, his calm gaze locking with the officer's frantic one. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "You accused the owner. You shackled the man who employs the very people who trained you. Every move you've made, every word you've spoken, it's all yours now, not mine." The crowd gasped, voices layering into a rising storm. Phones trembled, capturing the officer's paling face. The sergeant stepped in, his voice cutting sharp. "Release him, now." But the officer's pride fought back. his grip refusing to let go, his voice cracking. No, he's lying. He has to be lying. The tablet was raised higher, glowing for everyone to see. The registration, the ownership papers, the name, clear, undeniable. The name was his, the man in the suit. The accused, the owner. The officer's hands shook, the cuffs slipped, clattering against the asphalt, metal ringing louder than the sirens ever had. The crowd cheered, their fury transforming into triumph, and the man in the suit, still steady, still silent, lifted his head. The reckoning was almost complete. The metallic clang of the cuffs hitting asphalt echoed like a verdict. For a moment, the whole lot stood still, caught between outrage and revelation. The officer's hand trembled, hovering uselessly above the fallen cuffs. His face, once flushed red with power, drained pale beneath the weight of what he'd just seen, the glowing tablet, the crowd's roaring disbelief, the calm man still standing before him. "Check the system again," the officer demanded, his voice cracking. "Run it twice. It's wrong. It has to be wrong." "I knew," but the black-clad aide shook his head, firm, certain. "It's correct. Vehicle registered. Owner verified. His name's not just on the title. It's on the company that built the system you're holding." Gasps rippled. The crowd erupted again, voices overlapping in disbelief and vindication. "He owns it. He built the system? Oh my God." The officer staggered back, confusion clouding his fury. He turned to the sergeant, desperate. "This is a trick. You can't believe this." But the sergeant's face was stone. He had already seen enough. He looked at the suited man, then at the crowd, then back at the officer with something colder than doubt, disappointment. "Release him," the sergeant ordered again, voice sharp as steel. "Now!" The officer's pride twisted. His hands twitched, hovering between obedience and defiance. His mouth opened, but no words came. The man in the suit broke the silence, his voice low, deliberate, carrying across the lot. "You've already revealed yourself. Every shove, every word, every accusation. You think this ends with me proving who I am? Number. It ends with you proving who you are." The line cut deep, recorded from every angle, echoing instantly across live streams. The teenager's phone buzzed with comments flying faster than he could read. "Legendary. This cop's done. History in the making." The officer's face twisted. He lashed out one last time, spitting venom to shield his pride. "So what? You think you're untouchable because you've got money? Because you wear a suit?" His voice cracked louder, desperate. "People like you will never belong here." The crowd erupted with anger, a thunder of boos and shouts. The sergeant stepped forward, face tight with fury now. "That's enough. You're out of line." The suited man didn't flinch. His eyes locked on the officer, steady, cutting through the chaos like a blade through fog. "I don't need to belong to your line," he said softly, the calm of his words sharper than any shout. "Because I draw my own." The crowd roared. Applause, cheers, voices chanting, their energy shifting from outrage to triumph. The balance had tipped. The aide with the tablet stepped closer, showing the screen again, this time holding it high for the cameras. Clear, undeniable. His name, his company, his ownership. The teenager's live stream shot past 10,000 viewers. Screens across the world lit up with the moment the officer's collapse caught live, the suited man standing calm in dignity. The officer's knees weakened. His breath came shallow. The words he wanted to spit clung to his throat, choked by the truth unraveling before him. And then the SUV's driver stepped out tall, broad, composed, an earpiece tucked behind his ear. He scanned the scene with practiced precision and spoke quietly into a mic clipped to his collar. Confirmation delivered. Internal Affairs notified. The officer froze. His head snapped toward him, panic flashing. Internal Affairs? Number no. Wait. The man in the suit straightened his cuffs, calm as ever, his voice cutting through the officer's protest. "You ended your career the moment you opened your mouth. All I did was let you speak." The crowd gasped. Then they cheered, voices swelling into something thunderous, unstoppable. The sergeant finally moved, stepping between them, his hand raised like a gavel. "Officer, you're relieved. Effective immediately. Hand me your badge." The lot went silent. The words hung heavier than any insult, any shout, any siren. The officer's hands shook, his jaw clenched. He tried to form words, but the silence swallowed him whole. Slowly, reluctantly, he reached for the badge pinned to his chest. His fingers lingered on it, knuckles white, as if letting go meant letting go of the only power he had left. But he had no choice. The crowd had seen. The world had seen. The badge came loose. It dropped into the sergeant's waiting hand with a metallic snap. And just like that, the career he clung to so fiercely ended in the same place it unraveled in public, under the weight of truth, with the eyes of strangers watching. The man in the suit adjusted his jacket one final time, unshaken, unbroken, unbowed. His silence was no longer misunderstood. It was respected, revered, because silence, in the right hands, had just dismantled a career. The badge landed in the sergeant's palm with a sound sharper than gunfire. The metal clink echoed across the parking lot, final, unforgiving. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. Not the officer, whose chest heaved in shallow bursts. Not the man in the suit, standing tall, jacket sharp against the sunlight. Not even the crowd, phones frozen mid-air, as if the world itself had stopped to witness the fall. Then the roar came. Cheers erupted from every corner. Applause thundered like rain on metal. Shouts cracked through the air. Justice. About time. You see this? The truth wins. The teenager's live stream numbers spiked, comments flooding faster than he could read. Badge gone. He did it without lifting a finger. This is history in real time. The officer staggered, eyes wild, his face burning crimson under the shame. This isn't over, he shouted, voice hoarse, cracking against the roar of the crowd. He's manipulating you. He's not who you think. But the crowd wasn't listening. The world wasn't listening. The narrative had flipped, and he no longer controlled it. The man in the suit remained motionless, a pillar against the storm. His silence now thundered louder than the officer's outburst. Every second he didn't speak, the crowd filled the void with their own truth. The sergeant's hand clenched around the badge. His eyes narrowed at the disgraced officer. You've said enough. Step back. But pride wouldn't let him. The officer lurched forward, finger stabbing the air toward the man in the suit. Don't believe him. Don't believe any of this. He's just another liar hiding behind money and power. Gasps rippled. The crowd booed. A woman's voice cut through, sharp as steel. You humiliated an innocent man in front of us all. You don't get to talk about truth. Applause followed her words. The officer's face contorted, veins straining, his body trembling with the weight of collapse. He had no badge, no authority, just rage. The suited man finally spoke, his voice soft but carrying, precise as a blade. I didn't take your badge. You did. I didn't end your career. You ended it the moment you chose pride over truth. The crowd exploded again, cheers swallowing the officer's final words. Phones shook as people screamed into their feeds, chanting, clapping, raising fists. The SUV team stayed still, composed, a silent wall of power. The sergeant stepped closer, his voice low, unyielding. You're dismissed. Leave the lot. The officer's chest rose and fell, frantic. His lips trembled with protests that no longer mattered. He turned toward the crowd, eyes darting, desperate for one ally in the sea of judgment. There were none. Every phone was raised against him, every face etched with contempt. He was no longer the accuser. He was the accused. You'll regret this, he spat, his voice cracking. All of you. Boost swallowed him whole. The chants grew louder, unified, rhythmic. Justice, justice, justice. The man in the suit didn't join. He didn't need to. His silence was already the loudest voice in the lot. He lifted his gaze, eyes steady, calm as ever, letting the storm rage around him. His voice returned, measured, deliberate. This isn't about one man. It never was. It's about a system that thinks power is louder than truth. That, the crowd roared, their chants shifting, echoing his words back to him. Truth! 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 The officer's body sagged under the noise, under the humiliation he could no longer fight. His career was gone, his badge stripped, his authority dismantled not by violence, not by defiance, but by dignity he never understood. The sergeant barked the final command. Escort him out. Two backup officers moved forward, their grips firm, guiding the disgraced man away from the center of the lot. His protests shriveled in his throat, drowned out by the chant of strangers, the roar of justice, the triumph of silence. And as he was dragged away, the crowd parted around him, not with respect but with scorn. Phones followed his every step, capturing the long walk of shame, a man swallowed by the consequences of his own arrogance. The man in the suit adjusted his jacket once more, his gaze steady on the horizon. He hadn't moved, he hadn't fought, he hadn't shouted. Yet the ground beneath them all had shifted because of him. And for the first time, the crowd saw him not as a man accused, but as a man who had always been in control. The disgraced officer's shouts faded as he was escorted away, swallowed by the crowd's chants of, "Truth! Truth! Truth!" The parking lot trembled with energy, the kind of energy that only comes when injustice is overturned in plain sight. But the man in the suit had not yet spoken his final word. He stood tall, eyes sweeping over the crowd. Strangers who minutes ago had looked at him with suspicion now watched with reverence. Their phones, once aimed in doubt, now trembled with awe. The SUV aide still held the tablet high, its glow casting proof into the open air. But it wasn't enough for the man in the suit. Proof of ownership was only the first layer. The truth ran deeper. He stepped forward, away from the hood where moments ago he'd been forced down. His shoes struck the asphalt with deliberate rhythm, each step commanding attention. The crowd hushed, their voices dimming into silence, as though instinctively waiting for something greater. The sergeant straightened, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Sir, who exactly are you?" The suited man paused, his gaze steady on the officer who asked. Then he turned slightly, his voice rising, clear, unhurried, amplified by the weight of restraint that had finally lifted. "My name," he said, "is not just on the title of this car, it's on the doors of the headquarters 2 blocks away. It's etched into contracts your city depends on. It's written on the payroll of thousands of families." Gasps tore through the crowd. Phones shook violently as the words hit, one by one. The teenagers' live stream comments exploded. "Wait, he owns the company? This man is a CEO? They stopped the boss himself." The woman who had defended him earlier covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Oh my God, he's the one who built all this." The man continued, his tone still calm, but no longer hidden. "You dragged me down today, accused me without truth. But I didn't need to resist, because the truth was always bigger than this parking lot, bigger than one badge, bigger than one voice shouting in arrogance." The sergeant's face tightened. He understood now. His posture shifted, no longer authority over, but authority under. "Sir," he said softly, "I didn't realize—" The man's gaze cut him off. "You didn't need to realize who I was to treat me with dignity. That's the point." The crowd erupted again, this time not just in anger, but in applause. The chant changed, echoing back his words, "Dignity! Dignity! Dignity!" The man in the suit lifted his hand slightly, and the noise quieted like a tide pulling back. His voice was measured, sharp, unforgettable. Power isn't loud. It doesn't shout. Power stands silent and lets the truth do the talking. That's what you witnessed today. Phones shook as the crowd erupted once more. Tears, cheers, disbelief flooding together. The teenager's feed crossed 50,000 viewers. Screens across the world lit up with his face, his words, his revelation. The SUV door opened again. Another aide stepped out, carrying a leather portfolio. He approached with quiet respect, handing it over. The man in the suit opened it slowly, revealing documents, embossed with the seal of his company. He lifted them high enough for the cameras to capture. "This," he said, "is my proof. Not that I belong here, but that I never needed permission in the first place." The sergeant bowed his head slightly, shame painted across his features. "Sir, on behalf of this department." But the man cut him off gently, his words final. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to every man and woman who stands where I stood, without a name you recognize, without a company you depend on, because their truth deserves the same respect as mine." The crowd cheered until their voices shook the air. Tears streamed down faces. Strangers clapped each other on the back, united not just in victory for him, but in recognition of something bigger, a shift they had just witnessed with their own eyes. The man closed the portfolio, handed it back to his aide, and straightened his jacket once more. His eyes swept the crowd, calm, resolute. He had revealed enough. The truth had spoken. And now, it echoed beyond the parking lot, carried in every live stream, every post, every chant still ringing through the air. Dignity doesn't beg, it stands. And today, it stood taller than arrogance ever could. The air vibrated with the crowd's chants. "Dignity! Dignity! Dignity!" The word carried like thunder rolling through the lot, spilling into the street, echoing across phones live streaming to thousands more. The man in the suit didn't raise his hands to command them. He didn't need to. His silence had already orchestrated the chorus. The teenager's stream ticked past 100,000 viewers. Comments blurred across the screen. He didn't even fight back, and he won. This is bigger than one man. This is for all of us. Replay that line. Power stands silent. Legendary. On the pavement, the fallen cuffs still gleamed in the sun, abandoned like relics of arrogance. People pointed their cameras at them, snapping shots, captioning them with fire emojis and hashtags already trending. Number truth stands. The sergeant shifted uneasily, the badge still in his palm, its weight heavier than iron. He turned toward the man in the suit, his voice low, almost reverent now. Sir, the department will have to issue a statement. They'll want to contain this. The man's gaze didn't waver. Truth doesn't fit in containment. It spreads, and it should. The words struck harder than any shout. The crowd responded instantly, chants breaking into cheers, applause rattling the air. The woman who had defended him earlier stepped forward again, tears still streaking her cheeks. I've lived here all my life, she said, loud enough for the cameras. I've seen this story too many times, but this time, we saw the ending. And it wasn't silence, it was dignity. End of church. Applause swelled around her. She turned, pointing not at the officer now escorted away, but at the man in the suit. You gave us back our voice. Her words weren't planned, they were raw. And yet, the crowd roared as if they had rehearsed them together. The man inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, but said nothing more. He didn't need to. The voices rising around him now belonged to the people. A group of younger men at the edge of the lot started a chant, faster, rhythmic, pulsing. Truth stands tall! Truth stands tall! Within seconds, the entire crowd joined, stomping feet against asphalt, the chant booming into the sky. And the cameras captured everything. In homes across the city, people watched live streams with jaws slack, hearts pounding. In offices, workers huddled around glowing screens, whispering, "That's him, the CEO." They tried to chain him. In schools, students replayed the moment over and over, the shove, the insult, the silence, the reveal. The officer's humiliation wasn't confined to that parking lot anymore. It had spilled into living rooms, classrooms, boardrooms. His words, "You people never learn," were already immortalized as proof of his downfall. His career hadn't just ended, it had been broadcast. And at the center of it all stood the man in the suit, calm as a mountain, letting the storm swirl around him. The sergeant finally turned, calling to his men. "Clear the lot. Let him leave." His tone wasn't command anymore, it was protection, almost deference. But the man didn't move toward the SUV. Not yet. He looked back at the crowd, his eyes steady, voice emerging once more. Softer now, but waited. Today you saw what silence can do. But tomorrow, it has to be more than silence. Tomorrow, it has to be you. Oh, the crowd erupted again, some cheering, some crying, some repeating the line into their phones like scripture. Tomorrow it has to be you. The teenager's stream caught the moment perfectly. His camera trembled as he whispered to his audience. He's not just talking about himself, he's talking about all of us. The comments flew. I'm crying right now. This man is a legend. Tomorrow it has to be us. The chant shifted again, transformed, reshaped by the people. Tomorrow is us. Tomorrow is us. The asphalt shook with their voices. The humiliation of one officer had become the empowerment of hundreds, soon to be thousands. The man in the suit let the sound wash over him, his posture unbroken, his silence again louder than the storm. He had revealed who he was, but more importantly, he had revealed who they were. Witnesses, voices, truth. And in that moment, it was clear. His dignity had not just ended one career. It had sparked something far larger. The chant still echoed, "Tomorrow is us! Tomorrow is us!" as the sergeant's radio crackled to life. Static hissed, then a clipped voice cut through. Internal affairs confirmed. Officer suspended effective immediately. Collect his weapon. Escort him off-site. The sergeant froze for half a beat, then turned to his men. His tone was no longer uncertain, it was final. Disarm him. Gasps surged through the crowd. Phones zoomed in, lenses catching the disgraced officer as he stiffened, panic crawling across his face. "No, wait, this isn't right, you can't do this to me!" But two officers stepped forward, steady and deliberate. One reached for the holstered gun at his side, unclipping it with practiced hands. The other removed the taser, the baton, every symbol of power that had weighed so heavily on others moments ago. The officer's voice cracked as he protested, twisting desperately against their grip. "I served this city for years, you're making a mistake. I was protecting people." But his words rang hollow. They didn't echo like the man's silence had. They didn't ripple through phones or hearts. They vanished into the air, swallowed by the truth already spreading. The sergeant took the gun and baton into his own hands, then passed them to the aide in black from the SUV. The gesture was quiet, almost ceremonial, a transfer of authority from one power to another. The crowd erupted again, this time not in anger, but in satisfaction. They were watching justice crystallize, watching a man stripped not just of his badge, but of every weapon he'd used to impose fear. The officer's knees buckled, his voice shriveled into a hoarse whisper. This isn't how it ends. But it was, because the man in the suit finally stepped forward. Not rushed, not triumphant, but deliberate. He closed the distance until he stood a single step away from the man who had tried to chain him. The officer looked up, eyes burning with humiliation, desperation, and fear. The suited man's voice emerged, calm, steady, absolute. It doesn't end with me. It ends with you. And it ends now. Phones caught it. The crowd gasped, then roared, their cheers shaking the air. The teenager's live stream exploded past 200,000 viewers, comments blurring into a tidal wave. It ends now. His voice is power. History right here, right now. The officer tried to respond, but the words choked. His hands trembled where they had once crushed wrists. His voice faltered where it had once commanded. And the man in the suit turned away, dismissing him not with force, not with anger, but with the simplest gesture of all silence. The sergeant barked the order. Get him out of here! 2 officers guided the disgraced man across the lot, his steps stumbling, his protests broken. The crowd parted, phones still raised, documenting his long fall into obscurity. When he vanished beyond the flashing lights, the silence that followed was deafening. The man in the suit stood at the center of it, calm, immovable, his presence commanding without demand. He adjusted his cufflinks, straightened his jacket, then turned slightly toward the crowd. This is what happens, he said, voice even resonant, when arrogance forgets its place. Power without truth collapses under its own weight. Applause erupted again. Tears streamed down the faces of strangers. The woman who had defended him earlier shouted, "We'll never forget this day." The man inclined his head, a quiet acknowledgement, then added, "Justice doesn't need a shout, it needs a witness. Today you were that witness, carry it with you." Phones caught every word, the chant rising once more, louder than ever. "Witness! Witness! Witness!" And as internal affairs secured their files, as the sergeant closed his radio, as the SUV team tightened their formation, one truth was undeniable. The officer's punishment wasn't just suspension, it was erasure. His authority was gone, his name stained, his career ended under the gaze of the very people he once commanded. And the man in the suit? He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't lifted a hand. But he had dismantled an empire of arrogance with nothing more than patience, silence, and truth. The chant still thundered, "Witness! Witness! Witness!" But the storm was shifting. The rage of moments ago had become something steadier, heavier, not noise, not chaos, but conviction. The man in the suit stood in the center of it all, calm as stone, his presence commanding not through volume but through gravity. The fallen cuffs glinted on the asphalt behind him. The discarded badge rested in the sergeant's hand like a relic of arrogance. And the man who had once shouted orders now walked away in disgrace, swallowed by silence. It was over. The crowd knew it. The sergeant knew it. And most of all, the man in the suit knew it. He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the faces that had borne witness. The teenager still held his phone high, his voice trembling as he narrated into the stream. He didn't just win, he changed everything. The comments flew. Legend walking. He's teaching the world without even trying. I'll never forget this day. The man finally spoke again, his voice low, but carrying like a verdict. Dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it simply stands. And when it stands long enough, the world has no choice but to rise with it. The lot erupted in cheers, tears mixing with applause, strangers chanting words they'd never forget. He adjusted his jacket one last time, then stepped toward the black SUV waiting at the curb. The aides opened the door with quiet reverence, their movements precise, rehearsed, protective. But before he entered, he paused, turning back. The sunlight caught the sharp lines of his face, the dark strength in his eyes, the unshaken calm that had carried him through humiliation into triumph. He let the silence hang for one final beat. The crowd hushed, waiting, breathless. Then he delivered the line that would live beyond that day, beyond that parking lot, beyond the cameras. Justice doesn't need noise, it only needs truth. Remember that and carry it. The words landed like stone on water, rippling outward, sinking deep into the hearts of everyone present. The woman who had defended him earlier whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks. He didn't just defend himself, he defended all of us. The teenager lowered his phone for the first time, clutching it to his chest, whispering to no one in particular, "Tomorrow is me. Tomorrow is us." The man in the suit gave a final nod, then stepped into the SUV. The door closed with a soft thud, sealing the moment like the end of a film. The engine purred, smooth, unhurried, as the vehicle rolled forward, cutting through the parted crowd. They watched him leave in silence at first, then with cheers that followed him down the street, echoing against glass and concrete, rising like a tide that could not be stopped. The sergeant stood frozen, badge heavy in his palm, eyes lowered. He knew what the world would say by nightfall. He knew this story was no longer theirs to contain. And he knew the truth would live far longer than the echo of any siren. The SUV turned the corner, disappearing into the city. But the image of the man in the suit, calm, composed, untouchable, remained in every mind, every phone, every live stream. Because it wasn't just about a car. It wasn't just about an officer. It wasn't even just about him. It was about dignity. It was about truth. It was about power that doesn't need to scream to be heard. And long after the SUV vanished, long after the crowd dispersed, long after the asphalt cooled, one truth remained etched into that place. A black man stood accused. He stood silent, and by standing, he dismantled the arrogance of a system. Not with rage, not with violence, but with dignity that refused to bend.